Chapter 35. Elfrzl. Fabric it seemed of diamonds and of gold, with alabaster domes and silver spires, and blazing terrace upon terrace high uplifted. Here serene pavilions bright, in avenues disposed, there towers begirt with battlements that on their restless fonts bore stars. The Excursion, Wordsworth. lfrzl, the capital city of Mandal Ultima, is situated in the central part of the continent on a lofty plateau bounded on either side by mountain chains running north and south. The city lies on the eastern shore of Lake Ambu Balsa, or Shining Water, which is about 100 miles long by 30 miles and pours into the Hatava Nadi River, so named from the dark green colors of its waters, and which empties into the great Taiko Sea, 200 miles distance. The city, in its ground plan, is a quadrangle, 50 miles square, and is divided into 100 departments, and nearly 5 miles square. Each department is subdivided into 200 squares. Of these, one half are dormitory, occupied by private residences. The others are parks. Their arrangement is alternate. First domicile square, second a park, and so on. Hence, each square is bounded on its 4 sides by a park. The squares are occupied by residences of the citizens, the park by public buildings, and are beautifully ornamented with trees, fountains, and statuary. The architecture of the private residence presents a pleasing variety. Their grounds are laid out on an ample scale, and separated from each other by shrubbery or hedgerows. The dwellings are large and commodious, their adornments tasteful and beautiful. They are generally built of granite or marble of different colors, are from 2 to 3 stories high, surrounded by balconies and surmounted by domes, turrets, etc. of various styles. In the center of each department is a circular artificial lake of 1/4 of a mile in diameter. The city is adorned with palaces, temples, towers, etc., whose magnificence defies description. 4 great avenues, 1,000 feet wide and radiating from the grand center, traverse the city at right angles. 20 lesser avenues also traverse the city at right angles, separating the departments from each other. The squares are separated by streets. The pavement resembles dark green glass, is hard as flint and smooth as a floor. The center of the city, which is elevated above the environs, is occupied by an artificial circular lake, 6 miles in circumference, called Ambu Bohara, or Lake of the Golden Waters, from the brilliant color of its surface, reflected from the bright golden hue of the rocks and sand which the bottom is overlaid. It is supplied by underground aqueducts from the distant mountain streams. On a great esplanade in the center is a vast and magnificent temple. The surroundings of the lake are of surpassing splendor. 50 fountains, equidistant from each other, occupy its circumference, each 400 feet high and divided into terraces of different color, similar to the great fountains at the entrance of Glumoso Bay. Between the fountains are rows of colossal statues, single and in groups, of marbles, bronze, and brilliant metals. Sweeping around the lake are broad plazas, paved in mosaic colonnades, monoliths, and towers, their pedestals carved with symbolic figures. Beyond these are rows of magnificent palaces, temples, and public buildings, and floral gardens. The avenues are occupied in the center by canals supplied with water from the lake and spanned by handsome bridges. The borders are edged with mossy banks, platforms of green and white marble, and rows of trees whose branches interlacing form archways of foliage. On either side are palatial residences, theaters, opera houses, museums, art galleries, etc., all in splendid architectural style. The avenues and streets are thronged with all kinds of wheeled equipages propelled by electromotors, conveying the occupants to and fro with great speed. Countless airships and chariots fly overhead, ascending from or descending to the streets and residences in all directions. The canals are thronged with pleasure boats, gondolas, etc., propelled by electromotors, sails, or oars as suits the tastes of the occupants. The city is surrounded by a great boulevard paved with dark green rock and adorned with rows of trees. Beyond this are pleasure parks, gardens, etc., stretching out many miles into the surrounding country. The manufactories, wholesale trading establishments, markets, etc., occupy quarters beyond the city limits. On the lake side of the city are a great number of docks, piers, warehouses, etc. The merchant marine of lfrzl is immense. Thousands of ships traverse the oceans and sail up the Havati Nadi River and lake. The population of the city is about 10 million, comprising of the elite of the kingdom. The Rava Vanda, or royal palace of the Araji Samtarasnati, or race of the Thalurvarathan kings, occupied by the Grand Duke, Prince, and Princess, is situated on the great plaza surrounding the lake Ambuhara. Its grounds are a half-mile square. The palace is a quadrangle 400 feet square, built of marble white as snow. It is surmounted by domes, minarets, and towers, and surrounded with lofty porticos supported on fluted columns. In order to relieve the too dazzling effect of the white marble, others of different colors are employed in architectural details. The bases and shafts of the column are wound spirally with flowing vines and tendrils, carved in marbles corresponding to the color of nature. The capitals with their flotations and lilies so perfectly resemble the living plants as to deceive the eye. The arches between the columns resemble the Moorish or Sarsian, as seen in the palaces of the Alhambra, though far more beautiful, and are engraved with emblematic figures and flamboyant tracery. The architrave of the entablature is sky blue, the frieze of light rose color, the cornice is of a bright golden hue. The effect of these different varieties of color offset the white marble of the palace is exceedingly beautiful. The interior apartments are decorated in various styles. The walls and ceilings are inlaid with agate, lapis lazuli, malachite, etc., or adorned with paintings in fresco representing landscapes, sea, lake, and mountain views. The apartments are floored and paneled with woods of different colors. The central court is ornamented with trees, flowering shrubs, and statuary. In the center is a great circular basin of bright green marble, embellished with carved water nymphs, dolphins, and sunfishes, from which upsprings a lofty fountain arranged in terraces of different colors. In other parts of the court are smaller fountains of liquid crystal spouting in all manner of bewildering forms. The grand banquet hall, where state banquets are given by the Duke, is a marvel of splendor. It is elliptical in shape, and capable of seating 800 guests. Its architectural details and ornaments are magnificent. The windows are of various colored crystal, the walls adorned with splendid paintings in fresco. A gallery runs around the circumference of the hall 20 feet above the floor, its entablature of colored marble with carvings in alto relievo. It is surmounted by a lofty dome of sky-blue crystal, supported on the uplifted wings of carved eagles. The gallery is supported by rows of caryatids, figures of beautiful girls and young men of the three different races, upholding it on their upraised hands. Around the pedestal on which they stand are images of swans, aquatic birds, tritons, and dolphins, the latter pouring from their mouths streams of various colored and sparkling waters, falling in marble basins, while between the caryatids are sea and wood nymphs, dryads, bearing vases, urns, and cornucopias, filled with all manner of beautiful plants and flowers. In another part of the palace is an immense ballroom. It would be superfluous to describe its splendid appointments and decorations. It is also surmounted by a dome, and its walls hung with great crystalline mirrors, by which the perspective is increased to an almost boundless extent. The excessive grounds surrounding the palace are filled in all varieties of trees, fragrant and flowering plants, superb statuary, fountains of all varieties, some arranged in terraces, some shooting up in lofty columns or spreading out in broad showering sheets. Others resemble fans, whirls, spirals, and intricate network. Others great bubbling masses of foam of all the colors of the rainbow. The trees are occupied by different varieties of birds of beautiful plumage, whose song filled the air with melody. It would be impossible to adequately to describe one half of the charms and beauties of this Martian paradise. One day, in company with Prince Altafora and a party of friends, we embarked on 4 swift airships for an extended tour around the northern hemisphere. We visited nearly all the places of interest in the kingdom of Mandal Ultima and continued our trip over the 5 great continents and principal islands of this part of the Martian world, and some of the lands lying in the southern hemisphere, the kingdoms of Sundo Luzona excepted. We visited the several kingdoms, capitals, and principal cities, receiving distinguished courtesies from the kings, princes, royal dignitaries, and peoples of the various domains. Magnificent court receptions were held in honor of Prince Altafora, his guests and suite, the splendid splendors of which wholly surpassed anything of the kind ever seen amongst the proudest monarchies of earth. The tour occupied several weeks, and we returned to the palace of the Grand Duke.